So many people came to see Calvin Coolidge on Sundays at that church that they crowded out the members of the church. When Wright got, in church historians' views, before the National Press Club and gave that luncheon address that was so widely publicized that caused Obama to have to break with the church, that, and I quote here almost exactly, he really lost it in a big way. Obama did what he had to do and what he resisted doing, and I complimented him. I gave him credit for that. He didn't just toss Jeremiah right away, you know. He stuck with it the way we stick with wayward uncles, you know, or with eccentric friends, or with pastors who are preaching on things we don't agree with. A cousin of his who had been raised in close association with George W. Bush, but who did not share his cousin's political views, said he always laughed when people said that George W. Bush was being influenced by the Christian right, Christian right wing. He said, he is the Christian right wing. An evangelical who's involved with the Evangelical Roman Catholic dialogue told me that he would call George W. Bush the first Catholic president of the United States. This person knew John F. Kennedy personally, but he feels that Bush was more influenced by Roman Catholic thought. The journalist Mr. Morris, a Clinton associate, he said there was the Saturday night Bill Clinton and the Sunday morning Bill Clinton, and they were very different. One was undisciplined, hedonistic, etc., and the other was very much a church-goer who was affected by Christianity and Christian teachings and tried to put them into effect into, for example, his view of race relations and so on. But, Morris said, the two did not know the other side of Bill Clinton existed. Is it an option for presidents not to attend church? Well, Mr. Reagan got away with it. Reagan would go a whole year, maybe going one or two services, certainly a very small number. And it was criticized, particularly by Democrats, but Reagan went to prayer breakfasts. He did pray, apparently daily. He did speak the language of Christianity. As far as we can determine, he never took the name of God in vain, and so on. We've had other presidents I've named that very much took the name of God in vain but attended church. And so for him it was an option. He actually had to explain to the Washington Press Corps what an evangelical was. The only difference the American public saw was that Jimmy Carter sometimes seemed a little small-minded, a little detail-minded, such as the famous case of the who would play tennis on the White House courts. As far as his ethical stance, as far as the influence of his Christian faith on his practices as president, as far as his church attendance, still teaching Sunday school, even when president, which boggles the mind when you think about it. And I think even his unwillingness to go in and try to save the hostages in Iran until really pushed by public opinion into that abortive effort to do so, I think all of this came from his Christian faith. If we look at one of the most genuinely religious figures, who what you see is what you get in recent American history, it is Gerald Ford. Ford, met his wife in an Episcopal church. He attended church regularly. He attended a Democratic parish in Virginia where a lot of people worked in Capitol Hill for the Democrats. It was the closest parish to his home. The minute Richard Nixon resigned, the next Sunday, the Fords were at their home church. But he took a course at Whittier College, his senior year, 21 years old, and that the students called What I Believe. Those papers of Richard Nixon that he wrote in that class are in the Nixon Library in San Clemente. So we can read them and see where he stood at age 21. And he says he's no longer a seven-dayer, as he says. He's no longer a fundamentalist. He believes the Bible is an error. And he also states he doesn't believe in the virgin birth. He calls into question the physical resurrection of Jesus and so on. Those papers were around in the 1980s when he was interviewed on television. And the interviewer had read Nixon's senior papers at Whittier. He asked Nixon if he changed his mind since then, and Nixon said no. And he still believed in that, but he believed in a God, in a power, and so on, who oversaw the world and oversaw Nixon's actions and so on. But he plainly did not believe in the doctrines that Billy Graham, his close advisor, must have thought he believed in. Lyndon Johnson, very complicated mix of profanity and piety, more pious probably than he's been given credit for. But at the same time, church was where people were on Sundays. He liked to press the flesh. He drove the Secret Service crazy by going into coffee hours, and walking around shaking hands. Very hard to maintain security in a church coffee hour. John F. Kennedy, as his associates well knew, and as the press corps well knew, was not a very religious man. He had a tribal loyalty to Roman Catholicism, and he certainly wasn't going to become a Protestant, even though he'd been to a number of Episcopal prep schools and so on. But religion was not primary with him. He was his father's son, and his father missed Mass very often. The mother went to daily Mass. When Coolidge left the presidency, a lot of the members had left the church, and Truman says in his letter something like this. He says, "You know what happened then, don't you? The church had to close down."